I'm Jennifer Della Quadri, and this is the Raising Happy Teens podcast, where you learn how to successfully guide your teenager into adulthood without losing your sanity in the process. Let's do this. Welcome back to the podcast. In this episode, I invited TJ Matton on to talk about her expertise. She's a social worker, a psychotherapist, a coach, and an educator who's focused on helping adults learn to liberate their mind and bodies through play. And as TJ says, play liberates and gives us permission to embrace the ups and downs of life rather than just brace for them. TJ helps people find enjoyment in the everyday, playful ways to manage stress and empowering ways to greater fulfillment. Enjoy the episode with TJ Matton. Thank you so much for being here, TJ. I'm so excited to learn about you and what you do and have a little bit of information for my audience. Thank you so much for being on today.
Yeah, I am super excited to get to talk with you and to talk with the people listening.
Yeah, great. So first, just give me a little introduction of who you are and what you do and who you help.
Yeah, so I am TJ, and I am a psychotherapist in Annapolis, Maryland, and I'm also a coach. And my background is in attachment and complex developmental trauma. So I really fell in love with this field, working with maternal psychology. And so my work has been with moms of teenagers, moms of new moms, moms of toddlers, really moms who are struggling in a transition age. And what I focus on now is the psychology of play and how to help adults re-engage in the play state, which is a primal drive in the body, like hunger, thirst, sleep, play, anger. These are primal things in our body that we can't avoid, but culturally we really suppress anger, suppress play. And so my work is really about engaging adults in the play state. And I do that in my clinical work, but also as a coach individually and in groups.
Okay, so now that we got the foundations of that down, I've already learned a little bit here, but I think it would be really helpful for me and for everybody listening to understand when you talk about play, what does that mean?
Yeah, so it's such a wide range of it's such a wide definition, because when we think about play, we think about the frivolous definition of play, which is an amazing, one thing that all play has in common is that there's something enjoyable in it. But play is this spectrum that is calm and relaxing. It is like frivolous and illuminating, and then it's also very driven and focused. And so play it's not one behavior, it's a state of being in the body. And the thing that we know about play is that it is this feeling of being both activated, where the fight and flight actually is turned on in the body. So it's a feeling of being activated, like you're going after something and you're into something, but it also has this feeling of being safe and connected to yourself, to the object you're within, to the environment. And what play is like, it is abandoning the survival, like a survival state in the body. And so play is not one behavior specifically. It is a state of being engaged and activated, exploring, like curious, risk-taking, testing. And so it brings alive that kind of tester within the body.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I know when I hear the word play, I immediately think of like a little kid and playing with blocks or playing with trucks and Barbies and things like that. And I know that in my adult life, and probably is the same to be true for most adults, is play isn't really something that comes up.
Yeah.
Right. And it seems like anything that we do, a lot of especially high achieving people needs to have a really intentional purpose and productivity attached to it. What I heard you say is that it's an activity, it's an action, but there's safety involved, which can make it a little bit different than those survival behaviors and survival experiences that we have. So that being said, Tell me a little bit more. I'm really curious to know about the brain science behind it. I know you have a
Yeah.
lot of information about that because I think that could really be beneficial for my audience in understanding really the benefits of
Yeah.
playing more. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. One thing you said, and I'm going to come back to the brain thing, but it's also bridged, is play is this place that is the place that we kind of learn. So when we think about play as kids, like building towers with blocks, play is how you learn like gravitational forces. It's how you learn balance. It is how you test theories. And so play, even as an adult, is this place in the state of being where we're testing the expansion and the evolution of an idea, of our being, of a story, of a definition that we're stuck within. And so play is this place of contingency work and testing.
Mm.
And it can't be done passively. And so when we talk about the brain science, like I teach within this polyvagal framework and around the nervous system and the vagus nerve. And Deb Dana and Stephen Porges set up this like wonderful concept of the ladder, and that we all have the same kind of infrastructure of the nervous system, where we have safe and connected, we have play, which is right underneath that, fight and flight, which is kind of in the middle of the rung, freeze and collapse, and rest at the very bottom.
Mhm.
And so play is right here in the nervous system between fight and flight and the ventral, which is like a safe and connected.
Okay.
And one of the things is that our nervous system is built to always be on alert, always be protecting us. And so play is this place that we're telling the system, like, hey, I want you to be checking things out, but in a way that we're exploring. So it's like kind of, it has that almost feel of hypervigilance, like what's going on? How's this working? But in this like engaged and fun way that is illuminating and liberating and like we have enthusiasm kind of turned on in the body.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't feel like you feel really alive when you
Yeah.
play.
What I'm understanding, and tell me if this is correct, is that it's risk taking without that primal fear.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so like a lot of the time I have people who come to me and I'm like, what do you want to work on in coaching? And they give me sort of where they feel like they're really stuck. And I'm like, okay, great. We're not going to work on that at all. We're going to work on how, because the reason you're stuck here is because it's turning your primal fear on.
Okay.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to take this idea and this goal, like, and break it down into smaller play states so that you build up the capacity over our time together so that by the time we're done with your program, this doesn't even feel like a problem anymore. You haven't even worked on it yet, but you're like, oh, I can definitely do this because I've just built this capacity through play.
Yeah.
Because play is this place that you build capacity.
Wow. And when I hear that, it directly links to what I help my clients with, and that is stepping out of their comfort zone with safety.
Yes. And I think one of the things I always am trying to encourage like other coaches and healers, and like I do a lot of education to therapists, and is that anytime you're coaching or in a therapy position, like you want to be engaging the play state in your clients,
Mhm.
because play is this place where you're like, oh, this isn't working, so let me try this. Let me try this. But you
Mhm.
don't want to engage clients in fear,
Yeah.
like, because then it will cause that shutdown. You
Yes.
want to engage them in that, like, let's explore what's going on. And the way that we can be the most effective as coaches, as clinicians, as helpers, as healers is identifying our own play strengths and identifying our clients' play strengths so that we are creating like courses of action that engage their strengths, that are already there. Because again,
Yeah.
play is primal. We all have play strengths. We all have these drives in us. And
Mhm.
so when we can engage our clients in the play state, the work goes so much more smoothly.
Absolutely. And what it does is it challenges the person. Actually, really the understanding that I'm getting is to approaching it with curiosity
Yeah.
versus
Yeah.
like I have to do this, or if I
Yeah,
don't do this, then this bad, terrible thing will happen.
totally.
And when I hear you talking, it's reminding me a lot of many of my clients are in robotics, like on the
Cool.
robotics team and things like that.
Yeah.
Would you consider something like robotics to be play?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But hold on, play is not a behavior, it's a state of being. So like
Okay. Okay.
some people could be on robotics and like
Yeah.
under the pressure of parents and the
Okay.
culture and like not actually being enjoying it. Like they're doing it for the
Right.
resume building. Some
Yeah.
kids may be loving it,
Mhm.
right? And so like for the most part, like, yeah, it's definitely access to the play state.
Okay.
But it may be that they're more enjoying playing with other people than they are enjoying the robotics itself, because
Yes.
so it's also like, what are you experiencing in this behavior
Yeah.
so that we can assess whether it's play engaged.
Okay. I'm so glad you mentioned that because what that triggers in me is conversations that I have with parents who were really into something specific growing up and it really enriched their life. Like, just for example, theater, right? I
Yeah.
really love theater. I love being on stage. The whole dynamic of it. And they're like, I need to get my teen into this because it's so amazing. And maybe
Yes.
their teen does it and they're like, wait a second, being on stage is terrifying for me, right?
Yeah.
And so that kind of comes down to for the parents who are listening to this podcast, how can they support their teen in incorporating more play into their life without actively telling them what to do and guiding them in any specific direction? What would you recommend there in helping your teen find their method of play?
I mean, the greatest recommendation I have is to ensure that adults are having their own play states, that they're feeling fulfilled. Because again, I think one of the things we recognize as parents is that we are always being watched and that we are modeling for our kids. Like
Yeah.
that they're always bouncing their identities like off of us, like a backboard feel. Like, I want to be like this. I don't want to be like this.
Yeah.
Right. Like they're using that comparative nature that the brain naturally has. And so if we are pushing our kids into play without pushing our own bodies into play, it's going to engage that fight, like that fight dynamic in their kids.
Okay.
Or it's going to force our kids into dorsal. Like, I'm doing it just because you told me to.
Right.
Or so like our kids are just being obedient without actually growing.
Uh-huh. Like, I'm just doing this so I don't get in trouble.
Yes. Or I'm not going to do that because you're not modeling in your own being, like risk taking, pushing yourself out of the comfort zone,
Mhm.
taking the load off,
Yeah.
like engaging in things that are hard and interesting to you. And so, one of the biggest ways that we can encourage our kids to play is by following our primal need for play.
Okay.
And so, like, I have a story that's kind of coming up. I was talking with a mom recently about like her kiddo was doing art next, and like they were doing like like this kiddo was doing like some Christmas art, and the mom was like, "Oh my god, like they're not in the lines, like they're like kind of like they were like kind of like tweaking a little bit inside."
Yeah.
Um and I think this is like so relatable,
Yeah.
is like when you see your kid playing and you're like, it's not the way it's supposed to be. Right? Like,
Yeah.
why would you put the smallest block on the bottom? It's gonna fall
Uh-huh.
immediately, right? And like what's happening right there is that your desire to play is going unfulfilled. So it's
Mhm.
not necessarily like, and this gets labeled so often in languaging as like controlling.
Mhm.
And I think we become controlling when we are not in control enough. And
Mm.
so we start to kind of outsource control to these external places um in our lives and over beings in our that we are raising and collaborating with, instead of having spaces like, how can I control my art process? How can I control my creativity process? How can I feel embodied in like self leadership that
Mhm.
is like wanting to happen here? And so often when we want to get our tentacles and our fingers in like our kids' lives,
Yeah.
it's coming from a place of not having enough of our own play drive fulfilled.
Wow. Okay. Because I talk with on my podcast all of the time about letting your teenager be who they're going to be and do what they're going to do and encourage them. And a lot
Mhm.
of the parents that I work with, they have this fear of, well, what if, what if? And so then they,
Mhm.
in response, they start to try to control things.
Yeah.
There's a big rift in the relationship. So basically, what I'm hearing you say is that to break down that need to try to control your teen, you need to learn how to feel safe when things are out of control within yourself.
Yes. Yes. I mean, honestly, is there anything scarier than parenting?
Oh my
Like, I
God.
honestly, like, I have yet,
Yeah.
I have yet to
Yeah.
stumble into something that I think is as scary as parenting.
Yes.
And so many existential layers from the fact that like our kids are exposed to violence that we don't have control over. Our We are judged constantly about if our kids are good people or bad people, and that if they're doing bad things, it means we're a bad parent. Like, so we are constantly being performatively judged based on our kids' existences. We feel this sense of like drive and desire to guide them and lead them, and yet we are also powerless to the evolution in many ways, to the evolution of who they are. I mean, it is, parenting is terrifying.
Yeah.
Right? And so if we don't have places in our life where we feel scared
Mhm.
elsewhere, it's like we can't look at parenting with like that open chest and
Yeah.
that open body that's like, I can do scary things.
Mhm.
Things can go awry, and I'm good with that. Like,
Mhm.
my body knows how to handle when shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
My body knows how to what to do when the tower falls,
Right.
right? Like, if we don't have places in our life where we're feeling scared and developing capacity to engage in like that rough and tumble process of existing, parenting is going to be an overwhelming uphill battle for
Yeah.
our bodies.
Exactly. And it is really hard to parent, and always starting with that place of compassion. Yes, this
Oh,
is
yeah.
hard. And you learn so much about yourself as a person through being a parent. And this is a perfect way to describe it, because when they're young, you think about the amount of interaction and control,
Hmm.
technically control you have over your kids when they're young and like toddlers.
Yeah.
It's pretty big level of control. And then as
Yeah.
they start to develop and grow and become into the teen years, a lot of the parents in my audience have this big fear, like they're pulling away. I'm so afraid I don't have as
Yeah.
much control. What if, right? First, just have a compassion for that, but also set yourself up for success by developing self-trust. And that really comes from failing and getting back up on your feet again, failing in a capacity like you're mentioning that isn't going to break down your nervous system and send you into something.
Absolutely. I also think one of the things we learn as a parent, if we're focused on our own play, is what we need, like what safety mechanisms we need to have in place
Yeah.
for play to be successful. So I think that in some ways, like if we consider parenting like a place of play, because I do think there is like capacity for parenting to be considered play.
Mhm.
And I'll come back to that. But if we have play somewhere else, so for instance, like let's say like like recently I decided I really wanted to start getting into roller skating. Like I
Yeah.
want to be a roller skating dancer. It's not going well so far, right? I went to the roller skating ring one time and I was like, I'm obsessed with this vibe.
Yeah.
How do I get more of this? But I'm also terrified of falling and like really
Sure.
hurting myself in a real way.
Mhm.
Um, I have no mentors as to like how to even where to start. Um, so some of the things I learned is like, oh, I really want to one get some cushioning for my body. Like I need some knee pads
Mhm.
and and I want to wear a helmet for like my first month because like I want to feel safer in falling, right?
Yeah.
So this then you think about like, oh, in order to give my kid this permission to go to the party, we need a safety plan and process,
Yeah.
right? I want mentors of like people who are showing me how to dance, like how to roller skate dance and like are giving me these like a little bit more of a step-by-step process of like, how do you roller skate backwards? Like, I don't really want to figure that out on my own right now. Like,
Yeah.
I want to watch a video, right? And so then I'm also being able to translate this into parenting and be like, who of your friends do you admire the way they socialize?
Yeah.
Like asking your teen those questions, right? And so when we study our own play, we start to understand like what our uh, guardrails are
Yep.
that allow for us to engage in a deeper way in risk taking,
Okay.
that we can then translate how do these guardrails serve in building more trust in myself and in my kid and uh, as a parent. And
Yeah.
so like, and I think it's really hard to establish those guardrails as a parent if we don't have an experience of guardrailing ourselves through risks somewhere else in life.
Right. It's taking small incremental steps in that
Yeah.
direction with a safety plan in place.
Yes.
And you can do that
Yes.
in your life through actual activities like roller skating, which is amazing. I love roller skating too. So perfect play. And also in our relationships, in our relationship with our teen. One thing that can come up, and I wonder if you can speak to this, is I'm a little curious to understand a little bit more about the feeling that you mentioned
Yeah.
and how to understand what feeling it is that you're really looking for when
Hmm.
finding play, finding an
Yeah.
activity or something that ignites that.
Yeah. One of the questions I ask my clients like very early on is like, when was the last time you felt free?
Mm,
And tell me all about it. And when we look at places that we feel free, like free seems to feel like a play, like a guide word,
okay.
like, or a portal word that helps people think about like this, where we're kind of like off the expectations,
Yeah.
we're off the clock, um, we're feeling self in that sense of self leadership.
Mm,
Um, we feel engaged and aware. Because being free doesn't necessarily mean that we're not feeling scared.
mhm.
So one of the guideposts I ask is like, when was the last time you felt free? And tell me all about it.
Okay.
And like and then we can kind of understand a little bit more about like what are the like the again the guardrails we need to create a play state,
Mhm.
right? And both that helps us engage in it, but also protects from that outside like
Yeah.
world.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so
That makes sense.
that's one of the words I kind of, but then I also often explore like I do like, because our play is primal, we have play patterns that like follow us
Yes.
throughout our lifetime. So like if it's okay, like how did you play as a kid?
How did I play?
Yeah.
I roller skated.
Really? Love it.
But yeah, when I was not doing that, that was like a big thing when I was a kid. I played with Barbies, I played with dolls. I, made homes on the playground by scraping out the line of a house and like saying, this is the room, and right, like designing a house on the
Mm,
playground in the dirt. I liked to draw and color. Um, yeah, those were like my main methods of play when I was young.
yeah. So one of the things that's like interesting about the way you just talked about dolls and is you talked about it a lot as like, when we think about dolls, we often think about like storytellers, like imaginary, like, but that's actually not what you talked about. You talked about dolls and from like a more of a creator framework, like building the infrastructure. And so you like may lean more towards like creator play and directorial play. Like it was
Yeah.
interesting to hear you like build the framework, right?
Mhm.
That it was less about the dolls' personalities and the story you put behind them, but the infrastructure that allowed them to exist,
Mm,
right? And so you may lean more towards like kind of hands-on play,
mhm.
um, that is more structural as well.
Yeah.
And so this may like, so we would be talking like if I was working with you, I would be talking about like where do you feel like you're getting your hands dirty on things? And
Mhm.
how often are you doing that in a way that feels intuitive? And how often are you doing that in a way that you're following a plan?
Uh-huh.
And like how often are, so we would be exploring kind of like that range.
Mhm.
And then like for the roller skating, like was it more like you were roller skating with friends, roller skating like for fun? Like what was the roller skating vibe?
Yeah, I love that digging in because in talk and listening to what you said, it really does bring me back to the things that I did
Mhm.
when I was younger. I'm now doing in my business, and those are the things I
Mm.
love the most.
Yeah.
One of the things that we used to do was like pretend we'd had a tape recorder. There were no podcasts back then. We had a tape recorder and we would record a show on our tape recorder.
Every podcast person I've asked this question to was a podcaster and their kids. And it
I
makes
really
me laugh
was.
so much. I'm like, love that, like,
Yeah.
I love that, like, you're like the fourth or fifth person I've talked to who's doing podcasts. And it's like, I was recording episodes and doing interviews with people
Yes.
as a kid. And I was like, I love this for you.
Yeah, and same thing, like, I would do fake cooking shows when I
Yeah.
was making dinner, like, just
Yeah.
pretend like I'm doing a show and explaining.
Yeah.
Like, that is fun for me. I love that so much, and the questions that you're asking, I love how you're modeling digging into the feeling in what, like, the motivation was and what was fun, because
Yeah.
when I was playing dolls, you're right, I didn't come up with the storyline. I would, like, look at what my friend was doing and make my storyline like theirs.
Yeah.
So it wasn't about that for me.
Yeah.
And so when parents and with their teens want to dig into what play is for them, it sounds like a lot of it can go back and be traced back to what it was like for them when they were a kid, when they would get
Yeah.
lost in time.
Yeah. And like the other thing that you was interesting is that you didn't mention friends in your first, which
Yeah.
makes me think that like you're much stronger as an independent
Uh-huh.
player,
Yeah.
because I think one of the things I talk about is independent play, parallel play, and
Yeah.
collaborative play. And there's a spectrum, right? Like, and I personally love independent play and parallel play.
Mhm.
Collaborative play is something that I have struggled with a lot more and have done a lot of personal work on, like becoming a better play like collaborative play partner. But like
Yeah.
I love parallel play where I'm like body doubling with somebody, and
Mhm.
I love independent play. Like I could go sit at a restaurant or a bar or go to an art gallery by myself and like just live my best life in those moments.
Yeah.
Right? So it's also not surprising to me that you're not a co-host, for
Uh-huh.
instance, on your shows, right? That you have once again and kind of you found yourself in a leadership style position
Mhm.
where you're leaning into what somebody else is doing,
Yeah.
like listening to your friends' stories and like, oh, that's their storyline. Like I can play off of that
Yes.
in a way, but not necessarily like, let's build this play together.
Right.
Right. And so, like, again, like, kind of when I'm thinking about helping people re identify their strengths is like individual play, parallel play, and collaborative play, where we want to be able to work this spectrum, but we all have natural strengths
Mhm.
that we feel the most comfortable in. And
Yeah.
so, like, if somebody grew up with a bunch of siblings and they never played by themselves, like, it's going to be really hard for them to find independent play. And so, you really want to help them find a community that has shared interests
Okay.
versus if you have somebody who grew up in a much more independent driven play, like, where can you go take a class that's like more
Yeah.
silent, like a pottery style class
Yep.
where it's not so social?
Yeah, and it's so important too for parents when they're guiding their teens to remove what their preferences are and what their strengths are from their expectation of their teen and their kids,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they may really love independent play, or let's say they really love the interactive play with someone else and their teen is more of an independent play. They may think, oh no, there's something I need to help
Wrong
them
with
with
them.
and break them beyond that because it's
Yeah.
important for them, and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So to resist the control and really just go back to the intention, which is to incorporate more play and get more of that in their life.
Yeah.
So speaking to that, when someone's able to get more play into their life, what are the benefits in
Oh my
different
God.
areas?
I mean, the benefits of being a better player are like endless, like endless. I mean, I think the greatest thing that I have learned from like studying play and working with people in play is there is this fearlessness that emerges from the body and from the being, and not and in a way that we understand that life is just going to keep on lifing, and we don't have to live in this kind of self-protective state of this what ifs, what ifs, what ifs. We're
Yeah.
like, yeah, shit's going to happen, and then we're going to be able to roll with it.
Mhm.
Right? Like there is this sense of like this deep sense of trust that emerges as we study play. And but so I think it helps us kind of build forward this sense of resiliency and self-trust.
Mhm.
I think it also helps us feel more like it helps us feel more connected to others. Um, because when we're more fulfilled, we are more open to connection, right? Like we're not kind of building relationships with people from this um like scarcity place or this loneliness place. Like we inherently feel more fulfilled, which makes the any relationship, whether it's a play relationship or like a professional relationship or a kid relationship, that we aren't so we're pouring from that kind of fuller cup, and
Yeah.
we're exploring the world from this fuller cup, so we feel more resilient, more fulfilled, more connected, more trusting, more open, more flexible, also more clear about what we want to get out of things. I think one of the things you said that I think I want to kind of come back to about also helping your teen learn how to play
Yeah.
is our teens may have the same kind of fear patterns, and we may be feeling in to our teens fear patterns, right? So like if we have a teen who's like, no, I don't want to join anything social, and is that because they are not getting enough, like are they truly an independent player and they're not getting enough independent play and they're trying to establish a boundary about the kind of play they need?
Mhm.
Or are they clinging to independent play because collaborative play is scary or parallel play is scary, and they have trauma, like what I would call traumatizing incidents of being left out of collaborative play or being made fun of in parallel play, like where they are. And so sometimes one of the things I explore with people is when how to notice when we are playing for our personality versus clinging to a pattern.
Mm.
And so I kind of to talk about that a little differently, like I think naturally my strength as a player is an independent play. And for a long time, like I kind of clung to independent play, like all my free time, I would just do it solo.
Mhm.
And I really started to kind of challenge myself because I realized I was like gripping on to quality alone time in a way that I actually wasn't challenging myself to
Mhm.
learn more parallel play and more collaborative play because I had had such terrible experiences in collaborative play. So I think one of the things that we can explore when you're parenting a teen and when they're like resisting play is one, are they resisting as a way of, are they trying to communicate a wisdom of an unmet need? Like, I don't want to go do these things. And is that because they're trying to communicate, I'm not getting enough of this thing?
Mhm.
Or are they resisting because they are afraid of
Yeah.
the outside? And then I think as a parent, we get to say, like, okay, my kid seems to be super triggered by the idea of doing like social play. Like, and I know they love independent play, but I also really know as a parent that I need to support my kid in developing healthy relationships.
Mhm.
So then we, from our play experience and our play like wisdom, understand like, okay, I need to help my kid like take small steps towards that, and not just putting them into an improv group or
Yeah.
putting them into like a theater group where
Mhm.
it's like they're way out of fish out of water and you risk re-traumatizing them again.
Right.
And so I think part of kind of when our kids are resisting is understanding they resist in two ways. Like one, to protect needs that may be undernourished and
Mhm.
unseen, and because they're protecting a pattern of safety and
Yes.
it feels scary out there. And so I think we want to ask ourselves, like, where's the resistance coming from? Am I missing something or are they missing something?
That is a really perfect way of mentioning that, because the teen, like you said, may just be afraid of
Yeah.
whatever consequence. And it sounds like in both situations and incorporating more play, number one is or both of them really, incorporating play, and then also in stepping out of the comfort zone of play and getting into the things that the maybe group dynamics or independent,
Hmm.
is questioning, getting curious, and slowly making comfortable steps or uncomfortable steps
Yeah.
out of your comfort zone
Yeah.
over time.
And I think on the other end, we have teens that we see who are super high risk takers.
Yeah.
And um, and then so like we have kind of the opposite
Mhm.
kind of strategy of, are they taking risks because they're unfulfilled with, like, they need higher sensory play
Yeah.
and higher risk play, and they're not getting enough of that, right? There's not enough like challenge and excitement and liberation in their being. So they're taking like kind of unsafe risks. And we want to help them learn risk assessment through play.
Okay.
So again, like, are they going towards these higher risk places because they're trying to communicate, like, I need more exhilaration in my life.
Mhm.
Like, it's boring living in this world,
Yeah.
right? Or are they like clinging to risk taking because they're so scared and they don't know how to do risk assessment?
Mm.
And so it's, I think, also exploring the patterns that our kids are in
Yeah.
and building like that spectrum again, where they can really learn the full spectrum of play within their bodies, where they're getting independent play, parallel and collaborative play. They're
Okay.
getting calming play, fun play, and very driven, focused, and fulfilling play. That we want both spectrums to really be fulfilled.
Can you tell me real quick, just give me
Yeah.
a little rundown of risk assessment and what that looks like?
So every person, there's some really great research on like high like risk personalities, like high sensation seeking personalities. And one of the teachers that I took a class from years ago talked about how risk is the entry cost to high sensation play. Most people are not like um they don't like love risk itself. They're not like, I'm after being scared.
Yeah.
They're after the high sensory play.
Okay.
And then depending on their risk tolerance or their risk like aversion is how much they like how they can get to that higher sensory play.
Okay.
And so with risk assessment, one of the things that's really hard about having teens is that they are not great at risk assessment. Like, this is
Right.
not a developed part of their brain.
Yep.
So they either see no risk or they are hyper like aware of the
Yes.
risks in a way that's like not practical.
Yeah.
Um and so one of the things that we want to kind of explore with people is like, you know, let's say it went exactly the way you want it to.
Mhm.
Like, that nothing, like, all of these what ifs, like none of them happen. Like, it's a perfect experience. What do you get to experience out of that time, right? So that we start to understand, like, what is it that they're longing for from that event
Mhm.
or from that time or from that experience? And then that can kind of help us in risk assessment a little bit.
Okay.
Um, and so, like, to kind of give that a more practical thing, like, they want to go on a trip with friends, right? Like, what do you think that trip is going to be like? You're like, I think it's going to be super fun. I think it's going to be like, I'm going to get to connect with my friends. Like, we're going to get to like explore and do things. And it's like, okay, so it sounds like exploration is really fun, like important for you. Like, independent time with your friends is really important for you. And so you're starting to understand what they want to get out of it,
Right. The motivator.
the motivator. And it's almost allowing them to engage in that fantasy land. like really opening the door to that fantasy of like, and then what we get to identify is the risks that we see as adults that they may not see.
Mhm.
And we get to understand, like, are they ignoring the risks because they're afraid that like it's not going to be like that risk is there as a way to help, like ideally risk assessment is there as a way to help us create a fulfilling experience. Like
Okay.
like risk and is a practice of discernment. And so we want to help teens develop risk. Like, so what do you think would happen if like one of your friends got sick,
Hmm.
right? How would that change this vision? How could you also protect that vision,
Yeah.
right? And so risk is again this concept of kind of discernment and flexibility and but is really hard to do if we haven't kind of fleshed out that fantasy a little bit more.
So thinking it through, talking it through, and like you said, their brain may not automatically teach them how to analyze the situation and prepare for what's to come. They may be
Yeah.
a little more impulsive. So kind of
Hmm.
talking them through things so that you can help them with the risk assessment,
Yeah.
especially if they're a really impulsive teen that does take big risks.
Yeah.
Because the
Or
risk is important. It's important to have risk,
yeah,
right? Like
it's
that's where you
important to
develop
engage in
your
risk.
resiliency. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is all so good. This has been so really educational for me, and I kind of got a little bit of a coaching on here from you, and just that little moment I was like, yes, like it really did light things up for me and help me
Yeah.
kind of get more clear, because I know for me, I could use more play in my life. I
We
know
all
all of
we
my
all could.
clients could, right? And so tell me, how can people find you? How can they work with you? I think that it's really important that they have this ongoing relationship with you if they're interested in learning more
Yeah.
about play. So tell me,
Yeah.
where can people find you?
Yeah. So I am at the Playful Revolution, both my website and on Instagram. And there's a bunch of different ways to work with me. The lowest hanging like fruit to work with me is I have what's called the personalized play plan on my website, and it's $100. And you go and you do about 20 minutes of like survey, and I get that and I read it and I send you a reflection of like what kind of player I think you are. And this is a really easy way to engage with me. But then my kind of larger offering is an 8 to 10 week called Play Your Way. And
Mhm.
it is really about helping people identify their play strengths. It really does a lot of nervous system education. I do a lot of kind of assessments of like when did play get stuck in
Mm.
your being and what what are we working with as far as repressed and suppressed play drives so that we are kind of really working with your nervous system specifically. And then I coach you through all of the different 8 play personalities and we go through those, and so we start to kind of I find out like where your strengths really are in a more relational way,
Okay.
and then set up this kind of more long-term vision of who you are as a player and a mover through this world. And so there's a large kind of spectrum in which people can work with me, from this like kind of quick 30-minute, hour-long call with me to ongoing relationship with me through this 10-weeker, and as well as like I'm feeling stuck and I just craft what that time looks like for us together.
That's so good.
Um,
So you mentioned your Instagram, you mentioned your website.
mhm,
Those are the two places. I'll make sure I have
mhm,
that in the show notes, links to
mhm.
be able to find you. And thank you so much for coming on and talking with us about this and sharing your expertise and really giving your time to my audience. I really appreciate it. It was so good to have you here.
I am so happy to get to be here and to get to share with people this work that I find so illuminating and liberating. And that's why I call this the playful revolution, is that we have all been driven out of play, and it is our inherent right to feel joyful and playful and fulfilled and excited by this world. And I want the world to feel more of.
If you liked this episode, I'd like to invite you to join Raising Happy Teens, my free online community for parents of teenagers, where every week I host Ask a Coach. You bring your parenting questions, and I provide expert advice and coaching. Click the link in the show notes to join today. I'll see you inside.